The desert night pressed heavy with silence, broken only by the hiss of wind pushing through the cracks of a weather-beaten shack. Inside, a man lay sprawled across the dirt floor, breath shallow, shirt soaked dark from the wound searing at his ribs. His revolver rested inches from his hand, though his grip was too weak to claim it. He stared at the ceiling beams trembling in the flicker of a failing lantern, and he wondered if this was where his story ended, alone, half forgotten, in a shack that looked ready to collapse with the next gust. A sound disturbed the stillness. Not the coyote calls he had grown accustomed to, nor the settling groan of the timber. It was lighter, hesitant steps pressed into the dirt outside, then the creak of the door pushed open by a hand too frail to steady it. His muscles tightened. He forced his fingers toward the revolver, but the strength betrayed him. The door opened wider. She entered as if she didn't belong to this world, draped in a threadbare cloth that clung to her shape, shadows concealing most of her face. The lantern caught her eyes first, dark, restless, uncertain whether to flee or draw near. She stood in the threshold longer than he thought possible, listening, watching, as if making certain he was alone. Her steps softened as she crossed the room. She knelt beside him, a figure trembling yet determined. Her voice, when it came, was so hushed he wondered if the desert wind had carried it instead. "I'm not clean." The word struck harder than his wound. They hung between them, sharp, heavy, without explanation. He tried to ask what she meant, but his lips parted only to drag in another ragged breath. The cloth around her shoulders shifted as she reached for his wound. Beneath the folds, the outline of scars and grime caught the lantern's glow. Her hands, cracked and bruised, pressed against his side to slow the bleeding. He grimaced but didn't push her away. Her whisper returned, steadier this time, though no less burdened. "Don't look at me too long. You won't like what you see." He did look, because he had nothing else left to do. Her features came into focus piece by piece, dirt streaked across a weary face, strands of hair stuck damp to her temples, lips that trembled with words she would not give voice to. He noticed the tension in her jaw, the way her shoulders shook not from cold but from holding something in, shame, fear, or perhaps both. He wanted to ask her why she was here, why she risked coming into the shack of a dying man. But another memory rose, unbidden, the look on his wife's face the night their homestead burned, the cries of his children swallowed by smoke. He had failed them, failed to protect the only souls that mattered, and now some stranger whispered of being unclean as if she and he carried the same curse. His voice, rough from thirst, forced its way through. "Then neither am I." She startled, glancing at him sharply as if the words had no right to exist. Then her gaze softened, though she said nothing. Her hands continued pressing down on his side, firm enough to sting but steady enough to hold him tethered to life. A sound outside broke their fragile silence. Distant at first, like firecrackers cracking against the sky, then closer, unmistakable. Gunshots, sharp and hungry. The woman stiffened. She leaned nearer, her breath trembling against his ear. "They're coming," she whispered. "If they find you with me, you'll die worse than you're dying now." His heart thudded against the weakness in his body. He tried to push himself upright, but pain folded him back into the dirt. She caught his arm, surprising him with the strength behind her grip. "Don't move," she hissed. Her eyes darted toward the window where faint torchlight flickered between the dark silhouettes of mesquite trees. "You don't know who they are. What they'll do." He swallowed, his throat dry as bone. "I know enough." His gaze shifted to his revolver lying within reach. He flexed his fingers, forcing them to obey. She followed his eyes, then met them with a look almost pleading. "If you draw that, you'll bring hell through this door." He managed the ghost of a grin, though it cracked beneath the weight of exhaustion. "Hell's already here." Boots crunched against the earth outside. Heavy, deliberate, circling like wolves scenting blood. The woman pulled her cloth tighter around herself, shrinking into shadow, though her hands didn't leave his wound. The door rattled as if tested by unseen fingers. His revolver finally slid into his palm, though it felt heavier than it ever had before. He forced himself onto one elbow, breath tearing through his chest. The lantern flickered once, then caught steady again, painting both of them in trembling light. Her face was pale, eyes locked on the door, lips moving in a silent prayer or curse he couldn't hear. The boot stopped. Silence settled again, thicker than before. Then came the scrape of a boot across the threshold. He raised the revolver, arm shaking, vision blurring around the edges. The woman pressed harder into his side, as though she could hold both his blood and his fear inside him. The door creaked open, slow, deliberate. A shadow spilled across the floor, long and jagged. He took aim, knowing he had one good shot left in him, maybe his last. And then the shadow moved deeper into the shack. The barrel of the revolver trembled in his hand, though his eyes stayed locked on the widening crack of the door. A man stepped through, broad, shoulders hunched, rifle at the ready. Behind him, another shadow stretched long, then another. They came in pairs, moving with the slow confidence of hunters certain their prey had no escape. The wounded cowboy steadied his breath, willing his shaking arm into obedience. The first man saw him and sneered. A crippled dog in a broken shack. Not much sport. He raised his rifle. The cowboy squeezed the trigger. The revolver roared, fire bursting from the muzzle. The shot slammed into the man's chest and hurled him backward against the frame. Chaos erupted. The others stormed in, shouting, boots pounding against splintered wood. Bullets shattered planks, sparks flying in the lantern light. The woman dragged him toward the rear of the shack, half carrying his weight though he felt like dead stone against her strength. She didn't flinch when a round ripped through the wall beside her head, showering her with dust and splinters. She kicked the back door open with her heel and pulled him into the desert night. They stumbled into darkness, the cool air sharp against their lungs. Torches flared behind them as the hunters poured out, their curses carrying across the wind. The cowboy tried to push himself upright, but his wound protested, fire stabbing through his ribs. She caught him under the arm, forcing him forward. "Move," she hissed. "If you stop, you die." The desert opened wide, moon spilling pale silver across the sand and rock. Cactus spines glimmered like teeth, and the ground shifted treacherous beneath their boots. Behind them, the riders mounted horses, the pounding hooves rattling the night. The woman's breath came sharp and fast, her grip never loosening though he felt himself drag her down with every step. He spat blood, forcing words between gasps. Why are they after you?" She didn't answer at first, as though the question itself weighed more than she could bear. Then, between strides, she muttered, "Because I ran. And they don't forgive what runs." The riders shouted, voices carrying cruel joy. Rifles cracked again, bullets whining past their ears, throwing up dust at their feet. The cowboy shoved his revolver into her hand. "Take it." She faltered, eyes flashing. "I don't." "Take it." His tone cut sharper than the wind. "Point and squeeze. That's all." Her hand closed around the weapon though it trembled as much as his had. They scrambled down into the dry belly of a riverbed, crouching among stones polished by floods long gone. Shadows cloaked them. The riders slowed above, torches sweeping across the desert floor, hunting for movement. The woman's cloth slipped from one shoulder, and for a heartbeat the moon unveiled what lay beneath, raised scars running jagged across her collarbone, skin mottled with burns and bruises. She yanked the cloth back, but not before he saw. His heart lurched, not from revulsion but from recognition. She carried her pain on the surface as he carried his beneath. Different wounds, same burden. She noticed his stare, eyes narrowing. "Now you know why I said I'm not clean." He shook his head, the taste of iron thick in his mouth. "Clean don't mean what they told you it means." His words rasped, but conviction lent them weight. Above them, horses snorted. A man dismounted, boots crunching over rock. The glow of his torch cut jagged shapes across the riverbed. They crouched lower, the woman's breath shallow and uneven. The cowboy slid his hand over hers, steadying the revolver she clutched. "Wait till you see their eyes," he whispered. "Not the light. The eyes." The man above drew closer, peering down, suspicious. The cowboy's grip tightened over hers. Their breaths merged into one tense silence. The rider leaned forward, torch raised. His eyes flickered gold in the firelight. "Now," the cowboy breathed. The revolver thundered. The man's head snapped back, torch tumbling into the sand. Shouts erupted, horses rearing, flames sputtering out. Chaos rippled through the group as they scrambled to recover. The woman stared at the gun in her hand, chest heaving. I killed him." The cowboy's voice was grim. "You saved us. Don't let it twist in your head any other way." The hunters rallied quickly, furious, their shouts ringing over the desert. More shots cracked, sparks bouncing off stone. The pair crawled deeper into the shadows of the riverbed, weaving between rocks until the noise dulled behind them. They collapsed against a boulder, lungs burning. The cowboy slumped, sweat slick across his face. The woman pressed her hand harder to his wound, though blood still seeped stubbornly. He could feel the tremor in her touch, not from fear alone but from the weight of what she had just done. "You think they'll give up?" she asked. He let out a low, humorless laugh that ended in a cough. "Men like that. They'll chase until something breaks, us or them." Her eyes glistened in the moonlight, wide and restless. "Then we have to keep moving." He studied her face, the streaks of dirt, the lines of exhaustion, the scars she couldn't fully hide. Strength lived in her despite every cruelty etched into her skin. He nodded, forcing himself upright though the pain nearly folded him in half. The distant clatter of hooves rose again. The hunters had found their trail. The woman gripped the revolver tighter. "Then let them come." The cowboy leaned against her, drawing what little strength he could from her steadiness. Above them, torchlight swept once more across the night. The desert held its breath, waiting for the next clash. The dawn burned harsh and merciless as the fugitives clawed their way up into the shelter of jagged stone. The cowboy moved with grim determination, each step a battle against the fire gnawing at his ribs. The woman bore his weight without complaint, though the effort left her breath ragged. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now gripped the revolver steady, as though its weight had finally claimed a place in her bones. They paused in the hollow of a cliff face, the wind carrying the distant shouts of men still sweeping the desert below. She pressed him to the wall, urging him to sit. His body slumped, sweat carving pale rivers through the dust on his skin. She tore a strip from her cloth and bound his wound tighter, her movements brisk but not unkind. "You should have left me," he muttered, voice hoarse. She met his gaze, eyes fierce despite exhaustion. "And let them chain me again. Or carve another brand into me. I won't go back. Not alive." Her words struck him with a weight heavier than any bullet. He saw then that her fear was not of dying, but of being owned again. And for the first time since his family had been torn from him, he felt a flicker of purpose beyond his own grief. The clamor of pursuit grew fainter, swallowed by the canyons, but neither trusted the reprieve. As night fell, they built no fire. The cold pressed sharp against their skin, stars burning cruel and bright above. He drifted between pain and fever, shadows of memory chasing him, the screams of his children, the smell of ash, the gunpowder haze. When he surfaced, she was there, watching him with eyes that refused to close. It was near the second night that she spoke more freely, her voice stripped bare of secrecy. "When I told you I wasn't clean, I meant more than dirt." Her fingers traced the ragged lines hidden beneath her cloth, marks burned deep into her skin. "They made me believe these scars are all I am, that I'll never be free of them." He listened, the silence between them heavy with unspoken kinship. His reply came low and rough. "Scars don't chain you. They only prove you lived." Her lips pressed into a trembling line, as though she wanted to believe him but couldn't. She turned her face away, shoulders hunched. He didn't press further, he knew well how wounds resisted light. By the third day, hunger gnawed at them both. They scavenged what little the desert offered, prickly pears, a trickle of water pooled in stone. She shared her portion with him despite his protests, stubborn in her care. Strength bled back into his limbs slowly, though the wound refused to close clean. That evening, fortunes seemed to shift. They stumbled upon a lone rider, a weathered rancher with a sun-creased face who hailed the cowboy by name. Hope sparked for the first time in days. The rancher claimed to have heard of the pursuit and offered food, shelter, and a horse to speed them away from the hunting pack. The cowboy hesitated, suspicion stirring, but the woman's eyes shone with desperate trust. Hunger and exhaustion dulled his instinct, and at last he accepted the man's hand. They followed him to a camp nestled in a canyon, where fire crackled and the smell of beans filled the air. For a fleeting moment, warmth returned. The woman ate with ravenous quiet, her shoulders easing as though the world had relented. The cowboy watched her soften, and he almost allowed himself to believe they had found a fragment of safety. But the illusion shattered quickly. The rancher's smile tightened as he leaned close, his voice a low rasp. "You know there's a price on her head. Men will pay for what belongs to them." The cowboy's hand went to his revolver, but he was too slow. A rifle barrel pressed against the back of his skull. Figures stepped from the shadows, guns drawn, eyes glinting with cruel delight. The woman froze, her half-empty tin slipping from her hands. Chains rattled as one of the men threw shackles at her feet. The rancher's grin widened. "Easy coin, and you delivered her straight to us." The cowboy surged up despite the rifle biting against his scalp. His voice thundered through the canyon, hoarse but unbroken. "She's not yours." The men struck him down with rifle stocks, fists, boots. The ground rushed up, dirt filling his mouth, blood soaking his shirt anew. Through the haze of pain, he saw her seized, wrists bound in iron once more, her face a mask of fury and terror. She kicked, fought, screamed, but the chains dragged her down. The rancher crouched beside the bleeding cowboy, his words dripping poison. "You should have stayed dead in that shack. Would have spared you the shame of watching her go." The cowboy spat blood into the dust, his vision swimming but his resolve burning hotter than the desert sun. He forced the words through cracked lips, every syllable carved from pain. "I'll bring her back, or die trying." The men laughed and hauled her away, torches casting cruel light against the canyon walls. Her voice broke across the night, calling his name until distance swallowed it. Then silence, heavy and final, fell. The cowboy lay broken in the dust, ribs aflame, body trembling on the edge of collapse. Yet in the hollow of that canyon, as the last echo of her cries faded, he felt something ignite within him. Not despair, not surrender, but a fire fierce enough to burn through bone and blood alike. He would rise. He would follow. And he would not stop until every man who chained her lay in the ground. The sun climbed over the horizon like a blade drawn from its sheath, cutting fire across the desert sky. The cowboy rose from the dirt with trembling limbs, body broken yet soul sharpened into iron. Every step out of that canyon was agony, yet he pressed on, guided by the fading trail of hooves and the faint hope that she still breathed. His revolver felt heavier than ever, but it was his only companion, the only promise he had left. By the time he reached the outlaw camp, daylight was bleeding gold across the sand. Smoke rose from their fires, mingling with laughter and the metallic clang of chains. He crept along the ridge, pressing himself low against the rock. Below, the woman stood bound to a post, her cloth torn away, her scars displayed like trophies to the jeering crowd. The leader, a brute with a voice like gravel, held the branding iron in his fist, heating it in the flames until it glowed a merciless red. The cowboy's breath caught. His heart thundered not with fear but with something deeper, a vow forged in every loss he had ever endured. He descended the ridge slowly, revolver drawn, each step measured against the pounding of his pulse. A sentry spotted him, eyes widening. The cowboy fired before the alarm could rise, the shot tearing through the silence. Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for rifles, horses reared, shouts split the air. He strode forward, relentless, firing with the precision of a man who no longer cared if he lived so long as his bullets found their mark. The leader bellowed orders, dragging the branding iron toward the woman. She struggled against her bonds, her cry ringing sharp against the uproar. The cowboy's shots cleared a path, but each trigger pull drained what little strength clung to his veins. He felt the wound in his ribs tear wider, every step heavier than the last. The fight surged into a storm. Gunfire cracked, dust exploded into the air, men dropped screaming into the sand. He pushed forward, each breath a knife, each shot a piece of himself given away. And then, in the chaos, the woman broke free, the rope splintered under her desperate strength. She seized a fallen rifle, her hand steady, her face set not in fear but in defiance. The leader turned, sneer curling his mouth. "Back where you belong, girl." He swung the iron toward her. The cowboy lunged, revolver blazing. The iron clattered from the brute's grasp as the bullet tore through his arm. The woman raised the rifle and fired, the recoil jolting her shoulders. The leader staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, before collapsing into the dust. Silence spread in the wake of their defiance. The few men still standing faltered, then fled into the desert, leaving the camp scattered with bodies and smoke. The woman stood over the fallen leader, chest heaving, the rifle trembling in her grip. The cowboy dropped to one knee, breath ragged. Blood seeped fresh through his shirt, soaking into the sand. She rushed to him, dropping the rifle, her hands pressing against his wound as if she could will the life back into him. "You're bleeding out," she whispered, voice breaking. He met her eyes, and for the first time he saw no fear there, only strength, carved from fire and scars. His lips curled into a faint, pained smile. "So are you. Not from bullets, but from believing lies." His hand brushed against hers, weak but deliberate. "Scars don't make you unclean. They make you proof you survived." Her eyes filled, not with shame but with something freer, brighter. She clutched his hand, grounding him. Around them, the camp smoldered, dawn spilling light across the wreckage. They found 2 horses tethered nearby. With effort born of desperation, she helped him mount one while she climbed onto the other. They rode from the camp side by side, the wind carrying the smell of smoke and blood behind them, the horizon stretching open ahead. For a long time neither spoke, their silence filled with the weight of what had been endured. Finally, as the sun climbed higher, she glanced at him, her voice low but unbroken. "Am I clean now?" He turned his head, eyes narrowed against the glare, but his words came steady. "Cleaner than any of us ever were." Her lips trembled, not with grief this time but with something that edged close to hope. She faced the horizon, the chains gone, the scars still there but no longer heavy enough to bow her shoulders. The cowboy felt the ache in his body deepen, but the fire in his chest burned steady. He had not saved his family, that wound would never close. But he had saved her, or perhaps she had saved herself, and he had merely stood beside her long enough to see it done. The desert stretched before them, harsh and merciless, yet somehow it no longer seemed empty. Together they rode into the widening day, their shadows long against the earth. And somewhere in the silence between hoofbeats, the cowboy's voice lingered, not to her but to the unseen witness of their story. Scars don't make the end of a man, or a woman. They make the beginning.